For a closer look at why Congress did or didn't do anything this year, we put together a special roundtable of experts. Here's part one of my conversation with financial columnist Jennifer Streaks and Motley Fool columnist and blackenterprise.com management and consultant analyst Anjan Roy, adjunct professor of University of DC's School of Management, and accountant and author Ebong Eka, who's a CPA and a consultant with Levity.
They held us all hostage. They actually threatened to default. We had a government shutdown. There was nothing that this Congress accomplished that they should be proud of.
Anjan, is there anything to be proud of here in Washington?
Well, again, if the best thing you can say of what Congress did this year is they avoided a default on treasuries for the first time in American history, that's an unbelievably low standard. So clearly this, I would echo Jennifer's thoughts.
I mean, we've talked about this at length with all of you at some point during the year. And Ebong, I mean, there's a frustration not only in America but around the world that we always talk about governments becoming efficient, getting things done. We haven't done our part in getting things done here in Washington. What is the root of this? Is it because of the extremists on both sides of the party, or is it the White House? Is it the fact that maybe the will to get things done and compromise isn't there right now?
I think part of the problem is you have extremists on both sides of the party, as you mentioned, who actually are looking towards their base than they are looking towards the needs of the country. And once you have that, you're never going to have anything change.
What do you tell people who are watching this program at the end of 2013 and they look at Congress, they look at Washington, and we have this lingo called inside the Beltway, for example, but if you're sitting in Seattle, Washington, or in Tokyo, Japan, or in Beijing, China, it is very, very hard for those sitting outside of this room to understand why people can't agree on certain things, because over the course of the last couple of decades, Congress was supposed to have been known for, yes, they create a big ruckus, they create a big stink about things being unfair, and somehow the White House and Congress would ultimately have some sort of agreement. We really haven't seen any of that this year. Who's really to blame?
I think both parties, because you have the right who's basically saying we're not budging on Affordable Care Act, or also known as Obamacare. And we also have the left saying we're not going to budge on that either. So once you have two parties that are diametrically opposed on fundamental issues, you're not going to have any type of agreement.
Democrats and Republicans, they like to talk about, they may not admit to it, but they like to talk about winning and losing. So who won in this debate in 2013 when it comes to being fiscally responsible as a government? Democrats or Republicans?
Neither side won at all.
They're both losers.
They're both losers, and you saw that impact. You saw the polls and how the Americans felt about the fight that was going on. I mean, neither side won. Everyone looked bad, and it looked like they were all advancing their own personal agenda and not taking their votership into consideration.
Anjan, you are a management consultant. The chief executive of this country is a man by the name of President Obama. He's ultimately responsible for all of this mess, is he not?
Well, if he's part of the system, he certainly has his share of responsibility. And I would say this, I think part of the problems with these debates is that we're really asking the wrong questions. I would say the Democrats, although they may have politically scored points with the shutdown debate and they afforded themselves better than their opponents did, the reality is that the sequestration cuts went into effect at the beginning of the year, and that is a net drag on economic growth. That means less jobs, particularly when the economy is deleveraging and is in a liquidity trap, as some say it is. And so in that sense, sure, the Democrats may have scored better poll numbers, but in terms of getting their ideas implemented and doing what's needed in the economy in these circumstances, I don't think they afforded themselves very well in terms of getting their agenda through.
I think this is two parts. So the winners and losers, Congress, although national, is actually regional in sense, because you have people who are more worried about their constituents than they are worried about what's going on nationally in Washington. People outside of the Beltway really don't care what's going on inside of the Beltway. When you have that, you're going to have people in Congress who are like, why should I bother when my constituents will continue to vote me into office? And that's what it's about, is longevity in their constituency.
I mean, this makes it increasingly hard because you're trying to act nationally, but you're also held accountable locally. If you were advising the White House on how to redo the discussions of the debt negotiations and the budget negotiations, what advice would you have given the White House on this?
I would say that Obama did a better job negotiating in 2013 than he did with 2011. Did in 2011. He set the precedent, saying that we're not negotiating over the debt ceiling. That if you want to have a debate on policy, we do that outside the purviews of negotiating over the debt ceiling or a government shutdown. I mean, the equivalent of what the Republicans did, and it was just a faction of the Republicans, in my understanding, would be like the Democrats saying, we are going to shut down the government, or we are going to threaten default unless if you give us our changes for the Affordable Care Act, unless you give us, unless some wanted a public option or single payer or gay marriage, for instance, or even a cap and trade bill or whatever other priorities that Democrats and liberals have, to bring whatever priorities that one has into the negotiation over the debt ceiling or shutting down the government. That was the game changer that the Republicans attempted. I think Obama, to his credit, did not go down that road and did not negotiate it, in that context, because we can't have every single debate that we're going to have, and we're going to have debates for generations now, to then come down to the losing side saying we're going to threaten default or shut down if we don't get what we want.
Our panelists also gave us their take on a few other things, including the new boss at the Federal Reserve. We'll have that in just a little bit, and we'll hear what our guests had to say about Janet Yellen.